Hey guys, let's talk about the biggest winners after the Munitorum Field Manual of January 2024 and also the Balance Dataslate that was released alongside it. Without further ado, let's dive right in. First are the Assault Intercessors. I've always considered them to be the hidden gem of this codex because I just don't see how the guys that they did cost 80 points, now they cost 75 per squad, can be bad with these kind of assault or output abilities that they have. You're paying 15 points per model, which is a very, very low price, and it's 7.5 points per wound, which is close to the minimum level for the Space Marine Codex. And with how cheap this unit is, you're also getting a ton of attacks with Strength 4, which is quite good because it can be boosted relatively well with +1 to wound, unlike the Strength 3, for example, with the Drukhari, which for them +1 to wound would almost always only mean wounding on 5s, where with Strength 4 there are quite a lot of cases actually where you will be wounding on 4s with Strength 4 attacks. You get AP 1, so again, with any bonuses to the AP, it brings them to a very dangerous level. Just for example, the Deathwing Knights, the dedicated melee unit that costs I think 200 points now for a unit of 5, they only have AP1 as well, so AP1 is not something to laugh at. So if you get any sort of buff, you come closer to that wanted AP2 level that Custodian Guard have, the Grey Knights Terminators have, and a lot of other very good melee units have. And in addition to that good basic stat line, you're also getting inbuilt reroll 1s to wound, and also full rerolls to wound if you are targeting an enemy unit on an objective. That turns it into a completely different ballpark, because if we get any sort of help for this already impressive unit, like a chaplain with +1 to wound, for example, or the brilliant Honor the Chapter stratagem from the Gladius, which is just meant to be used on the Assault Space Marines because you move and advance them in the first turn, then in the second turn when you stage them behind a ruin, for example, you turn on the Assault Doctrine, you turn on Honor the Chapter for 1 CP, and you get 40 attacks with Strength 4 +1 to wound with AP2 and damage 1, rerolling all wound rolls provided that you are targeting an enemy unit on an objective, which is not going to be probably that difficult. And that package will only cost you 150 points. You don't even need a character to go alongside this unit, which I think is just brilliant. Even if you're not planning to run Gladius, there are other ways to buff them, like the Crucible of Battle stratagem from the Firestorm, which will give you the +1 to wound that you really want to have here in order to punch up into those higher toughnesses. The Lance from Corsar Khan, or advanced fallback charge from Calgar that you can also get. So a lot of ways to buff these very inexpensive Space Marines. So take a look at them when building your next competitive Space Marine roster. By the way, if you want to win more games of 40k and you want me to personally look at your roster and figure out what may be wrong with it and what improvements we might make to it, check out the links in the description for my Patreon, where you can get all that help. Ever since the Outriders came out with the Indomitus box set, I was always enamored by them. I really love their boxy look and the fact that they're on these huge 90mm bases, making their footprint just humongous. That is sometimes good because, for example, in melee, it's very easy to position a lot of oval bases around the one that is in base-to-base contact with the enemy unit, so you can get all of your attacks in. So even if you are running a 6-man squad of the Outriders, you'll still be able to fight with almost everyone, even in a very tight spot. Obviously, there are drawbacks as well. That's not what we're going to talk about now. What we're going to talk about now is the fact that this is one of the cheapest units available for us, for the Space Marine Codex, with 6.6 points per wound level of efficiency. And for that, you are getting 12-inch move, automatic 6-inch advance, toughness 5, so a lot of very good stats. Those bikes were always a very good forward recon squad, and they are also, I think, a good torpedo unit because they have a relatively high toughness and a lot of wounds. So unless you are running them into, for example, a unit of Terminators with AP 2 and damage 2, which are the perfect type of melee to kill these bikes. If you're running them into some sort of chaff unit, they will keep that unit at bay for a long time, or tanks, for example, as well. In order for that to happen, obviously you need them to be fast, and with that, two of the detachments can be very helpful: Company of Hunters that we have seen in the new Dark Angels book, and the Stormlands Task Force as well. The Stormlands is very good because it gives the bikes immediate advance and charge, so you're getting an 18-inch move bikers, which are very, very fast, especially for Space Marines. Or for Company of Hunters, we can also get the advance and charge. I think with an enhancement, we definitely get an advance and shoot, and also we can have an enhancement with a character. For example, you can join the Chaplain on bike to them, where you get Scout 9 for the Outriders. A lot of ways to really move them up the board and also help them in melee as well. For example, Stormlands has the +1 to wound, lance stratagem, where you get +1 to wound on the charge. These guys are not to be fighting knights or something like that, something big and scary, but they are there to provide pressure on units that your opponent doesn't really want you to touch in combat, like, for example, tanks that don't shoot really well. Even if you are not going to block them from shooting because of big guns never tire, you're still going to block them from moving around, so changing their line of sight, which can be very helpful. And also the bikes cannot be shot unless the tank falls back, so another good thing. Next is the Land Raider. Land Raiders didn't receive any direct buff, so no points decreases or anything like that, but they were buffed indirectly and buffed very well, I think. First, a lot of natural predators for the Land Raiders received buffs, so Chaos Space Marines, Leagues of Volta, and Eldar, all of these factions that were traditionally very strong against any kinds of Space Marine builds, and Land Raider as well, are now a bit weaker, or in some cases much weaker than they were. And with how efficient Land Raider is just in general, any extra second it spends on the battlefield, and having less natural predators means it's gonna be alive more, will mean that it gets a bump to the value. Second, probably even more important buff is the clarification to what constitutes a normal move. And what it means for us Land Raider lovers is that a Land Raider becomes an uber efficient way to charge things that like to jump away. So anything that has this reactive movement type of ability, where if you end the move with a 9 or something like that, I can X, so I can teleport away, I can move 6 inches away, etc. Anything like that cannot be activated upon you disembarking your melee units or something from the Land Raider. That is not considered a normal move in this case. You still can overwatch units to disembark from the Land Raider, as far as I understand, but you cannot use these reactive movements. And that means that all the Space Marine, Grey Knights, Drukhari shenanigans that we're so used to, they will not work if you are using Land Raider to destroy those annoying heretics and Xenos. That might sound like a subtle change to you if you've never used the Land Raider, but believe me, it's a very often occurring situation, and now Land Raider gets to reinforce his status as one of the best delivery systems for melee units that are available to us in the Imperium side of 40k. Next up are the Inferno Marines. They are 80 points per squad now, squad of 5. They already were a very attractive unit at 85 points, and obviously are now even better. I'm mostly thinking about using these guys in the Firestorm detachment for obvious reasons. Strength 6 is much better than Strength 5 against a lot of targets, and if you couple a 10-man unit of these with Vulcan, for example, you get a very, very strong mix with 10d6 shots with 2 CP immolation protocols that will give them devastating wounds, and you will get full rerolls to wounds from Vulcan, and for 260 points per package, that's not bad at all. Even a 5-man small unit that costs 80 points is already a very good tech piece for a support unit that allows you to force battle shock tests on enemy infantry units, which can be game-changing in some cases, and also gives you a very nasty overwatching capability against light infantry squads. All in all, a very good support unit for any Space Marine force, and now is even cheaper. I'm glad GW is giving us more options in that sense, because it would be extremely extremely boring to see just 3 units of 5 scouts in every Space Marine list everywhere, and I'm glad that we have more variety in the support pieces, especially considering that now the cost difference between Scouts and Inferno Marines is not that vast. It's still 15 points, the Scouts are 65, but the Inferno Marines are quite a different unit, so it's justified. Talking about the Scouts, I honestly think they are also a winner of this Munitorum Field Manual because they were nerfed. They received a 10 points bump to their cost, so they, instead of 55, they cost 65, and I honestly think they should have been 65 all along. They never were supposed to be 55. That's just stupid to be a 10 wounds unit of 5 Space Marines with toughness 4 and still cost 55 points as if you are some sort of acolyte unit from the Inquisition. Why I think they are winners is because their biggest natural predator, the indirect fire guns, were nerfed significantly, both the Whirlwind and Night Spinner, of course. We will now see less of those guns, and it means that we'll actually get to use our scouts, stage them behind a ruin, and then when opportunity presents itself, move them out onto an objective, for example. They are still incredibly cheap. 6.5 points per wound is very, very cheap. It's even cheaper than the Outrider we talked about before. Those are 6.6 per wound, these are 6.5. Very cheap for what they do, and they do a lot. There's still no real alternative to their exact skill set, the infiltration ability, the scout move, and also being able to jump up and down like Calidus, be it without the deep strike rule. You probably don't want to run more than 1 or 2 of these now, maybe even 1 if you already have Calidus and other support units, but you still want them in general. They could have easily raised their price by 15 or 20 points, but 10 is a very limited debuff, so I think we should be happy for them. So if you have 10 scouts painted up, don't stress about that extra 10 points that you're gonna pay, because they were always gonna be this cost, if not more. Let me know who you think are the biggest winners of the Balance Dataslate and Munitorum Field Manual changes. I would love to know your opinion, and I'll see you next time.